I had worked at Claremont Holdings for 9 years. Not the flashiest job, but it paid well. The hours were stable, and I was proud of the work I did. My position as operations coordinator may have sounded simple, but without me, half the departments wouldn't have made their weekly deadlines. I knew it, and the people who worked alongside me knew it too. But our new manager, Vanessa Bright, didn't care about what had been built before she arrived. She wore arrogance like perfume. Subtle at first, but nauseating the longer you stayed near her. She was in her early 40s, came from some high-profile consultancy firm, and started making changes before she even learned our names. The only person she listened to was the junior analyst she brought with her, Miles Benton. Young, smug, always with a comment on how things were outdated. I was never rude, never confrontational, but I wasn't silent either. I asked questions when processes were being altered for no good reason. I defended Marcia from payroll when Vanessa humiliated her in a meeting. I suppose that painted a target on my back. The real blow came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. She called me into her office. No HR rep, no notice. Just, "Can I see you for a moment?" In that fake sweet tone she used when she was about to twist the knife. When I sat down, she didn't beat around the bush. "I'm letting you go," she said, folding her hands. "It's not performance-related. I just don't like you." No write-ups. No warning. Just that. I sat there stunned. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. And then she smiled, a tight-lipped smirk that made my stomach turn. "I've already cleared it with HR," she added. "Your exit interview will be this afternoon. You'll be escorted out after." What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, is that a month ago I saw something she thought no one had witnessed. I had debated what to do with that knowledge, whether to say anything, whether to protect myself. I had no reason to act, until now. By the time I packed my things, I had made up my mind. She would regret this. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, reliving every word she said, every smug glance she threw as security walked me to the exit with my box of things. My photo with my late husband, my favorite coffee mug, a small plant I had nurtured for 6 years, all of it stuffed into cardboard like I was a problem to be cleaned up. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect. I was cold, focused, the kind of calm that comes when grief hardens into resolve. The secret Vanessa didn't know I knew? 2 weeks ago, I had stayed late to finalize the Q3 inventory corrections. I passed the executive lounge, usually locked after hours, and heard voices. Hers and a man's. I didn't recognize his voice, but I knew the tone. Nervous, flirtatious, then her laugh, then silence. The next morning, I saw them exit the private elevator together, her blouse misbuttoned, his tie stuffed into his pocket. I didn't think much of it at the time. Office affairs happen, and I'm not the gossiping type. But I remembered the man's name later when I read it in an internal memo. Richard Whitlow, external auditor, hired to lead the compliance review. And Vanessa? She was the executive liaison for the same audit. There was a clear conflict of interest, a violation of ethics policy, a serious one, the kind of thing board members don't take lightly. But I didn't go to HR. Not then. I needed more. The next day, instead of lying on my couch in defeat, I got dressed as if it were any other workday. I made tea. I opened my laptop, and I began writing a letter. Not to HR, to someone higher. Audrey Lansing, Senior Vice President of Operations. She'd been with the company for over 20 years. I met her only once, at a company retreat 5 years ago. She struck me as sharp, quiet, but firm. I looked her up, still in the same position, still respected. I wrote carefully, professionally, no accusations, only what I had observed. I included dates, descriptions, questions. I mentioned the potential breach in protocol. I didn't mention the firing, yet. And then I waited. 3 days later, I received a reply. Short, but pointed. "Thank you. We are looking into this immediately." It was strange being out of work, but still waking at 6:30 every morning. Routine is a powerful thing. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in, not yet. I'd sit by the window, sip my tea, and wait. By the 5th day, I was certain nothing would come of it. Maybe Audrey hadn't cared. Maybe she was like the rest of them. Protect the ones in suits, silence the ones who've already been pushed out. And then, Early Friday morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, this is Audrey Lansing. I hope I haven't caught you at a bad time." Her voice was just as I remembered, calm, deliberate, and without fluff. She didn't waste words. Told me she had personally escalated the matter to the ethics committee. There would be an internal inquiry. Confidential. Quiet for now. "I appreciate how you approached this," she added. "It's rare to receive something so precise." I thanked her. She didn't say more, and she didn't need to. I hung up and stared at my phone. Something was shifting. Later that same day, I received a message from Helen Sanders, one of the executive assistants I used to have coffee with every Wednesday. She kept her head down, never involved herself in drama, but she always noticed everything. Her message was short. "Vanessa canceled her meetings this afternoon. Looked pale. Richard came in and went straight to HR. Thought you'd want to know." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The next morning, I drove to the cafe down the street from the office, a place where staff from Claremont often grabbed lunch. I didn't go inside. I just watched from my car. Watched as familiar faces came and went. Watched Miles, Vanessa's golden boy, step out with a furrowed brow and no blazer. Watched Sandra Peterson, head of HR, pull up in her car on a Saturday. Something that never happened. My phone buzzed again. Helen. "She's not coming back Monday. Word is, she's been suspended until the inquiry is complete. Nobody knows why yet." I allowed myself a small smile. Not out of cruelty. Just relief. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about the dignity they stripped from me in that office. The way Vanessa smirked as she pulled the rug out from under me like I was nothing. Now, she was the one with something to lose. And I hadn't even told them everything. When you've been silenced in public, you learn to speak in private. Quietly. Strategically. Not to destroy, but to expose what others worked so hard to hide. I hadn't left my apartment in 2 days. Not because I was sulking, but because the walls had finally started talking. My inbox, dormant since I left, had begun filling with whispers disguised as messages. First from Alicia, a mid-level project manager I'd only exchanged emails with a few times. Her subject line read, "Saw what they did, shameful." She didn't go into detail, but she offered to talk if I ever needed context. That word stuck with me, context. As if she knew more. Maybe she did. Then another, from David Rourke, someone who had worked under Vanessa briefly before switching departments. His email was longer. Nervous. Apologetic. He said she had threatened to blacklist him from promotions if he didn't stop sniffing around budget discrepancies she had signed off on. That was months ago. "She buried it," he wrote. "Changed numbers, reassigned vendors, made it disappear. I didn't say anything. I'm sorry I didn't." That was the piece I hadn't even told Audrey. I'd suspected it when I saw the quarterly report inconsistencies Vanessa insisted were temporary lags in reconciliation. I had documented everything, but it was outside my purview to raise questions. And now, here it was, someone confirming it. I wrote back, short and direct. "Would you be willing to speak with the internal auditors? I'm not asking you to do anything publicly. Just verify what you've said if they reach out?" He replied within minutes. "Yes, I'm tired of pretending." Meanwhile, Helen kept messaging me in fragments. Miles looked like he'd aged 5 years. HR's door hasn't stopped swinging. Richard hasn't been seen since Tuesday. And then, Vanessa's laptop is gone. They've seized her email server access. Something had cracked open. This wasn't just an office affair anymore. This was bigger. Financial misconduct, abuse of power, retaliation. I felt the weight of it pressing against my chest. Not fear, but the burden of truth. I opened the folder on my computer where I'd saved screenshots, timestamps, email trails. Everything Vanessa said wouldn't matter. Everything she thought no one had noticed. And still, there was one more thing I hadn't shared. Not yet. It's a strange thing, watching someone's empire crumble without raising your voice. The emails kept coming. Quiet confessions, half-written regrets. Some were from people I barely knew, others from those who had avoided me in the break room. I never responded with bitterness, just understanding. People act from fear, especially in places like that, where power smiles at you until it no longer needs to. Alicia finally followed up. She asked to meet. We picked a small bakery off 5th Street, neutral territory. She looked exhausted, not from guilt, but from carrying too much truth for too long. She blackmailed me, Alicia said after 2 sips of tea. 3 years ago, I made a mistake. A big one. Missed a deadline on a client account and forged a timestamp to hide it. I confessed to her in confidence. She told me it was fine, that she'd cover it up. A few months later, she started asking for favors. Reports rewritten, staff reshuffled. She never threatened me, not directly, but it was always implied. How many others? I asked. Alicia shrugged. Enough. What Vanessa had built wasn't just control. It was leverage, a network of silence. I wondered how many of the promotions she handed out were rewards for compliance, or bribes for silence. Helen messaged me later that day. Audrey's team interviewed Miles. He looked like he was about to pass out. I didn't feel sorry for him. He was smart enough to know better. And yet he followed her blindly. Sometimes loyalty becomes complicity. Still, I hadn't touched the last piece of what I knew, the piece that kept me up at night. A year ago, a friend of mine, Laura Henson from IT, had come to me shaken. She'd found a backdoor script embedded in a finance tool Vanessa had insisted be installed. It rerouted certain vendor payments into a secondary account, masked behind shell contractor names. Laura reported it, quietly, anonymously. 3 weeks later, she was gone. Personal reasons, they said. But I knew better. We all did. I hadn't told Audrey about that yet, because Laura didn't just leave the company. She died 3 months later. Car accident. That's what the news said. Single vehicle, nighttime rain. But I've replayed it 1,000 times. The fear Laura carried those last weeks, her panic, her silence. Vanessa didn't cause the crash. I know that. But she broke Laura long before the road did. That's why I saved everything. And that's why I wasn't finished. I reopened the folder titled Laura, Finance Tool Logs. Everything was still there. Code screenshots, internal emails, timestamps. Even the old Slack messages Laura had sent me the night before she left. She had been scared, sure, but more than that, she'd been disappointed. She believed the company would protect her, that someone would listen. No one did. I had been silent back then, out of fear, out of survival. But now I was older, fired, and nothing left me afraid anymore. I reached out to Audrey again. I didn't send everything, not yet, just a portion. Enough to show her the fraud wasn't just ethical misconduct. It was structural, prolonged, planned. I included Laura's name. I needed Audrey to know this went deeper than office politics. She replied 3 hours later. We need to talk. I'm sending a secure upload link. When I opened it, I saw the list of who was being investigated had grown. Vanessa, Richard, even Miles. And someone I hadn't expected, Douglas Reed, head of procurement. I didn't know him personally, but I remembered Laura mentioning him. He had signed off on the vendor changes tied to the false contracts. A few hours later, Helen messaged me again. Miles tried to resign. Audrey didn't accept it. She wants him to talk. I stared at that line for a long time. It was happening. They were turning on each other. By the end of the day, 2 new names surfaced in the loop. Elliot Tran, an internal auditor from another region, and Denise Carlisle from legal. The company was closing ranks, preparing for whatever storm might follow. I watched all of it from my quiet kitchen table, the light dimming outside. I thought about Laura, about how scared she'd been to send me that last message. If anything happens, you know where it is. And I had. All this time. I uploaded the full file that night. All of it. Every bit of evidence I'd stored, saved, encrypted. It wasn't just about Vanessa anymore. It was about all the people who helped her, and all the ones she destroyed along the way. The company made its first move on Monday morning. A corporate-wide email was sent from the office of Audrey Lansing. It was brief, but unmistakable. Claremont Holdings is currently undergoing an internal review of financial operations. Certain personnel have been placed on administrative leave as part of this process. No further comment will be made at this time. No names were mentioned. But inside the building, the silence was gone. Helen sent me a message. They escorted Douglas out, cleaned out his desk. Vanessa's photo is gone from the org chart. She followed it with another. Someone said Miles is meeting with legal every day now. He looks wrecked. It spread fast. The polite nods, the careful glances, the sudden hush when someone important passed by. People were scared, not just of what had happened, but of what was still coming. By midweek, Claremont Holdings had brought in external auditors, not just Elliott, but a full team from a third-party firm. The investigation had grown teeth. They weren't just looking at Vanessa anymore. They were combing through years of contracts, vendor lists, payments. I got another call from Audrey. This time, her voice was different. Tired, but steady. She thanked me. She told me they had matched the records I submitted with the system logs from Laura's server. It was undeniable. Everything Laura found had been real, and everything Vanessa had done to bury it, including falsifying timestamps and instructing others to delete files, was now documented. There was something else, too. Legal is preparing a statement, Audrey said. Once it's finalized, the board will be briefed. It's likely this will go public. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally felt the weight beginning to lift. Before she hung up, Audrey added something unexpected. I reviewed your file. You were never written up. Not once in 9 years. The firing was personal, improper. You should have never been removed. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. I just whispered, "Thank you," and stared out the window. That afternoon, Helen told me that Richard had officially been terminated. "'Cause undisclosed, but everyone knows," she wrote. And then, late in the evening, I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Laura's sister. It said, "I heard your name mentioned today. I just want you to know. She trusted you." By Friday, the walls inside Claremont Holdings weren't just whispering. They were echoing. Helen told me people were packing up before lunch. Half of procurement is gone. Legal's shutting down department-level approvals until further notice. Alicia messaged me for the first time since our meeting. There's a board meeting scheduled for Monday. Closed doors, internal only. They've never done that before. Outside of it all, I moved carefully. Quietly. I hadn't spoken publicly about any of this, and I didn't intend to. I hadn't posted on social media. I hadn't replied to any of the internal employees who were suddenly so sorry for how things turned out. Regret that arrives late is not absolution, just delayed self-preservation. But I wasn't bitter. I was focused. That weekend, I received a formal letter from Claremont's legal department. An apology. Carefully worded, of course. They didn't admit wrongdoing, but they acknowledged procedural inconsistencies in the way I was dismissed. They offered a modest severance extension, and they included an invitation. Would I be willing to meet with the board chair, Mr. Franklin Greer, privately? Not for testimony, for insight. Your perspective, the letter read, has proved invaluable. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I thought of Laura, sitting at my kitchen table with a folder of printouts, her hands shaking as she whispered, "I think they're hiding money, and I think she knows." I thought of the security escorting me out like I'd stolen something, and now they wanted my perspective. I said yes. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. I wore dark gray slacks and a blouse I used to save for project presentations. Clean, classic. I brought no documents, no laptop, just myself. Mr. Greer was older than I remembered, stern but not unkind. He didn't pretend to be surprised. "We failed in oversight," he said. "What's worse is we created an environment where people like Vanessa could flourish." I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just listened. Then he asked me the question I wasn't prepared for. "If you were sitting in my chair, what would you do next?" For a second, the room felt too quiet. Then I said, "You can't fix a culture by removing a few names from the directory. You need to build something no one like her could survive in. And that starts with telling the truth, not just legally, but publicly. About what happened. About what you let happen." He said nothing, just wrote something down. When I walked out, I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt steady. The statement came on Wednesday. It wasn't just an internal email this time. It was public, posted on the company website and circulated to every client, stakeholder, and partner Claremont Holdings had worked with in the last decade. It read, in part, "Recent internal investigations have revealed serious ethical and financial misconduct committed by individuals in positions of trust. These individuals acted in violation of both company policy and the law. Claremont Holdings has terminated their employment and referred all findings to the appropriate legal authorities. We acknowledge failures in oversight and are taking full responsibility. Structural reforms are now underway." The statement didn't name names, but everyone knew. I watched the news segments that followed. Some small business networks picked it up. Not front-page material, but enough to stain reputations. Enough to raise questions. And that was all I had ever wanted. Not revenge, but light. Later that afternoon, I received another message from Helen. Miles just walked out. No warning, no goodbye, just packed up and left. I didn't ask if he had been fired. It didn't matter. He had been part of the machine. Whether out of ambition or fear, he had chosen to look away. And now, he had no ground left to stand on. I heard from Alicia again, too. She said she had been approached by the legal team and offered protection if she cooperated fully. "I said yes," she wrote. "It feels strange, being honest after so long, but it also feels like breathing." That line stayed with me. Audrey followed up with me once more, this time not from a work number, but from her personal email. It was short, sincere. "I meant what I said. If you ever want to come back in any capacity, you'd be welcomed, but I understand if that door is closed for you." I didn't reply right away. I sat with that message for a while. Coming back? To what? The building would still be the same. The elevator would still ding on every floor. The coffee machine in the third-floor lounge would still leak. But the people, some were gone, some remained, some would never truly change. I wasn't angry. I just knew my time there had passed. Laura never got that choice. She never got to walk back through those doors. Not by choice, not with dignity. But I did. And I chose not to. Spring came quietly. I hadn't noticed at first. I'd been too wrapped up in the aftermath. The calls, the emails, the sudden attention from people who once barely nodded in my direction. But eventually, I looked out the window and saw the first green buds pushing through the bark on the old maple in front of my apartment. Life doesn't ask for permission. It just grows, whether you're ready or not. I started volunteering at a local community business center. Nothing formal, just helping older women navigate online job applications and draft resumes. Many had been pushed out of jobs they'd given decades to, left with nothing but silence and severance. I saw my own story in theirs. I never told them what had happened to me. That part didn't matter anymore. One Tuesday afternoon, I found a small package outside my door. No return address. Inside was a slim leather notebook, worn but cared for, and a note written in a tidy hand. "I thought you should have this. It was Laura's. She kept it in her drawer, her private one. I found it last week while cleaning out her storage. She always said you were brave. Amanda." I sat down and opened the first page. There were notes, fragments of code, questions about vendor IDs, names she didn't trust. But between the pages were bits of herself, tiny thoughts jotted down on lunch breaks, worries about speaking up, even a quote scribbled in the margin. "Tell the truth, even if your voice shakes." I ran my fingers over the ink. It had faded, but it was still legible. Still here. I hadn't expected to cry, but I did. Not loudly. Just quietly, the way women cry when they've held too much for too long and finally feel safe enough to let it go. Later that week, I walked past Claremont's building. Just once, out of curiosity. There was scaffolding on the east side. Renovations, maybe. New nameplate being installed. Change always starts slow, invisible at first. But eventually, even glass buildings crack open to light. I kept walking. I didn't look back. Laura had been silenced, but her story had not, and neither had mine.